I'm going to talk a bit about the darkest aspects of third chakra consciousness. Um, and so I've already done a video on the third chakra and some of the other chakras. This is really getting to the nitty-gritty of, kind of what we might consider in modern terms the toxicity of the third chakra, or how the darker aspects of the chakra may manifest in our personality and in the world. So, the darkest aspects of the third chakra definitely have to do with personal ego. This is really the area where we experience personal power. I've talked about that in the third chakra video, that this can be considered our power chakra. But it is also sort of the last stop before energy starts flowing into the heart and the higher up chakras. So, a good example of if somebody is sort of stuck in this consciousness are a couple of questions that I ask. And judging by the reaction to these questions, somebody can gauge whether they are sort of locked in, ego aspects of the third chakra, or if they may be moving forward. So for the third chakra, somebody who has worked with sort of the darkest aspects of this chakra and their energy is moving forward can answer the following question. What if it were to be okay if I were a regular, ordinary human just like everybody else? So somebody who is still in, kind of stuck in the third chakra, still kind of in the darkest aspects of the third chakra, will argue against that. They need to feel large. They need to feel special. They need to feel seen. They're still dealing with the wounding of the previous chakras. And so their response will be, of course I'm powerful, of course I'm large, of course I'm seen, of course I'm worthy. When we actually resolve this chakra and we feel powerful, we feel worthy, not only can we go into feeling like it's okay to be an ordinary, everyday human, just like everybody else, but there's kind of an irony that happens with a lot of our chakras and a lot of spiritual matters. And that irony is that the people that truly have power, the people who truly feel self-worth, the people who truly feel special within themselves, they no longer need for the world to reflect it back to them. They no longer need to argue against the world. They no longer need to prove themselves to the world that they are worthy, that they are special, that they are powerful. This sounds kind of like a joke, but some of the most powerful people that I've met or interacted with, spiritually, magically, that sort of stuff, they very much look like ordinary, everyday people. You may not be able to pick them out of a lineup. It's kind of a running joke, but a lot of really skilled people who are occultists kind of look like the type of people that you might call to fix your fix your computer sort of thing. And that is because if you have experienced magic, if you've experienced power, if you've experienced whatever you want to call it, enlightenment, consciousness, all that sort of stuff, you're no longer in that sort of game. That game of needing to prove yourself to the outer world, that game of like all those spiritual competitions that people get into, that game of needing to say and announce, I am worthy, I am special, I am enlightened to the world. The other question that really trips people up is asking, what would happen if you were not as conscious as you believe that you are? This is the biggest and darkest barrier in the third chakra, Because a lot of people can rise to third chakra awareness. And what happens is that you can see that, I don't know, 97, 98, 99% of the population is stuck in the first and second chakras. And so it is easy from this perspective to attempt to have power over people, to look at people with contempt, or just to believe that the self is kind of some all-powerful deity instead of seeing that you still have a ways to go. A lot of times how this shows up for people is that there's still a desire to have power over people. For example, we can see on Netflix and HBO all these documentaries of all these cult leaders who believe that they're the next, demigod, that they're the next chosen one. And a lot of them, it's because they've gone into a place of third chakra consciousness. And what that allows is a certain amount of perspective, but they have not reconciled their own inner power issues enough to go into a heart-centered place, a loving place, a place where they see others as equal to them, as composed of the same stuff as them. So a good indicator for this is a complete disregard for empathy, having a lack of empathy or compassion for other people. Another good thought regarding this is that a lot of spiritualities in the third chakra sort of perspective are all about blaming the individual for the circumstances of their existence. And I will say that some of those spiritualities can find people in the first and second chakra where they need to be, which is um, people have a lot of difficulty taking personal responsibility for themselves. And so if someone or something can get them to start taking personal responsibility for themselves, that is wonderful. But if you have the perspective that one person singularly is in charge of their existence, that is a very limited perspective. There are all sorts of forces and beings and energies and thoughts and systems that keep us how and where we are in this world. And so back to that question one more time, is that if I ask somebody, would you consider, that you are not as far along as you think you are? Somebody who has a great deal of consciousness will be like, yeah, you know what? That is a wonderful question. I will consider it. Somebody who is still locked in the third chakra and below will want to fight you for it. And so I included this in my book, Working with Kundalini, this question, because it is one of those questions that if you deeply consider it, it can take you light years from where you are. But what that also results in is a lot of people stuck in ego who, want to fight me because the thought of them not being enlightened, the thought of them not being superior or special, them being just like everybody else, there is a part of them that is still suffering and in pain and needs to believe those things. And so it gets the person sort of mired in toxicity, mired in the sort of darkest aspects of this chakra, um, to, kind of enact that sort of power dynamic with others or attempt to. And outside of spirituality, we see this in our world all the time, bosses that have a little bit of power and use it to lord power over us, all the cult leaders that I've talked about, where all of a sudden they're, dehumanizing people and treating people as lesser than, people who consider other people sheep because, they're in the first or second chakra. Um, or sometimes, rather ironically, that comes from people who are locked in the first chakra talking about other people locked in the first chakra being sheep and that sort of stuff. Um, but there is both a lot of health as well as danger that can come from a third chakra perspective, because it is a much different perspective than being stuck in the first and second chakra, but it still isn't free of the ego enough doesn't have a healthy, whole sense of individuation, sense of self to the point where it can proceed forward. Because moving into the heart chakra will teach somebody that it is okay to be themselves, that we are all imperfect, instead of looking for this perfected at the end of their path, realized sort of state. So some of the most conscious people I am aware of not only would take that question and use it as a form of self-inquiry to keep themselves sane, to keep themselves humble, to keep themselves aware of how far they need to go. But it is incredibly easy for us to keep ourselves stuck in this chakra because we can consider it kind of the last stand of the ego in plenty of ways. In the first three chakras, we feel like we are a separate, alone self. And if we were to let that conceptualization go, all of the competition, all of the fighting, all of me versus them, me versus, the other person, those all start to fade. Um, we no longer need to fight against reality, fight against the world if we start to go into the heart and the upper chakras, because we recognize that it is a mirror. And we no longer need to, this will unravel more in like kind of the upper chakras, but there is a reason why people need to consider themselves powerful, enlightened, and all of these sorts of things. And it comes from very basic wounding. If we are willing to let go of all of that, we can make our way through the darkest aspects of the third chakra into a place that is more heart-centered, into a place that is less focused on proving ourselves to ourselves and to the outer world.